TKO might be forcing a big change within the WWE, plus so much more. Don't forget I'm giving away this championship belt at 100,000 subscribers, so go ahead and click subscribe today. All right, everybody, I want to kick things off talking about AEW Collision, some very interesting news. Andrew Zarian came out. If you guys don't know Andrew Zarian, he's from the McMahon podcast. He has dropped so much news in the past, largely in particular to AEW TV deals, things like that. He came out and noted on Twitter that he has heard, that AEW won't be airing Collision on the same week of the World's End pay-per-view. Now, this hasn't been confirmed by AEW themselves, but Andrew Zarian does have a high accuracy rate when it comes to dropping scoops like this, and it does make a lot of sense because AEW World's End is a new pay-per-view that's taking place in December, but at the same time, that pay-per-view is expected to take place on a Saturday evening, which pretty much screws Collision. And it's kind of a weird thing. I don't know if it's that big of a deal. I'm sure Warner Bros. Discovery is pretty on board with like everything that AEW does, especially in this regard. I would have a hard time believing that perhaps maybe AEW is doing this behind their back. I feel like this would have been something where they, have spoke about it and discussed it in some form and then basically came together with a decision that, hey, it's okay, we could skip this episode. It is pretty strange. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this is the fact that like AEW would be competing with themselves on that Saturday time slot. But I hate the time slot, to be honest. I don't like the idea of wrestling being on the weekends. If you follow this channel, I advocate for SmackDown getting off on Fridays and AEW Collision leaving Saturdays. Whatever happens with the AEW TV deal, whether they stay with Warner Bros. Discovery, whether they go somewhere else, I would be so much more in favor of Collision getting moved off of Saturdays. It's tough, right? You got WWE, you got NXT, you got Impact, you got so much stuff happening, especially with TNA making some massive changes. I don't want to see TNA and AEW compete head to head. I don't want to see WWE and AEW compete head to head. I don't want to see WWE and TNA compete head to head. But also at the same time, I don't want Collision on Saturday nights. I think it's a problematic thing. And it's very problematic in the sense that, when Collision competes with WWE pay-per-views or UFC pay-per-views or whatever the case may be, their ratings typically go downward as well. So it's not something I feel like is beneficial. I really don't like the time slot, but I have no problem with them skipping this episode in favor of a pay-per-view, as long as it's not done behind Warner Bros. Back, right? And I don't even think that's the case. I wouldn't even assume such a thing. But that does bring us to our next topic of today's video. I've been wanting to talk about this. Guys, NWA drama, it is so highly controversial. I'm actually going to have a deep dive on the More Ango channel where you guys can hear me discuss this more at large. But NWA is reportedly losing their TV deal with the CW network. To make matters worse, talent backstage within NWA are very unhappy about this news. There was a report that came out today, basically from House of Wrestling, that suggested Billy Corgan has completely withdrew himself from those that are close to him. Guys, I'm gonna tell you guys what Nick Hausman had put out today. So basically, a WWE source told them that the impression that talks with the network accelerated following the incident as fans had bombarded the CW with outrage over the angle. We are talking about the angle in which James Mitchell was seen doing cocaine live on the NWA pay-per-view. The report also noted that one source described Pat Kenny as the Johnny Ace of the NWA, and Dave Lagana. These were two people that NWA leaned on heavily. Billy Corgan relied on them heavily in terms of the creative process and communication with talent. We all know that Dave Lagana is no longer with the NWA, and Pat Kenny had moved into a talent relations role, but is still seen as a second in charge next to Corgan. Multiple people had noted that they didn't know what they were doing at TV events until the day of the show, if not close to an hour before filming. While one source understands Corgan has a lot on his plate, they are hopeful he puts a team of creative people around him to help filter his ideas. NWA is going to be looking at re-signing more talent in June. However, talent are currently frustrated by Billy Corgan's leadership and are looking into other places they can go once free and clear. The report noted that House of Wrestling has also learned that Corgan giving various talents tests to see how they would react and prove their loyalty, which have not been well received. Example of tests were things like making over talents who come into work lose right away just to see how they would react, or for Corgan to be overly critical of a talent who has done nothing wrong to see how they take it. A lot of frustration with Billy Corgan in the NWA, and rightfully so. I want NWA to win. If somebody from the NWA is ever watching my content, please understand that I want you guys to win. I want you guys to grow. I think there's a lot of things that need to change within the NWA to make that happen. I know in the past when I've spoken about NWA, I would be very positive, and at times I would be very negative. But the reality is they have a fantastic roster, and to find out that their TV deal is being lost because of this spot, it's erroneous. It's literally erroneous. Like, this is such a crazy situation to fathom. And yes, WWE has a lot of money to play with right now to sign people. So of course, these people are going to look for a way out, because if you can get paid by the NWA or get paid by the WWE, what would you rather do? So clearly there's some sort of issue with Billy Corgan's leadership. There's some sort of issue with the way things are handled in the NWA. And when you add in the factor that they're going to be losing their TV deal potentially, it's a blow to the company. It's a blow to the company. And I want to see this company win, because I am a huge proponent in the idea that the wrestling industry is better with multiple companies. However, just because you're the smaller company, I'm not going to sit here and hide my criticisms. I think NWA relies too much on nostalgia. I think the NWA has way too many championship belts that don't mean much. I think NWA doing the studio-based, like the visuals are all studio-based and nostalgic and old school. Yeah, that's not going to work for the younger audience. You know, there's so many things on and on and on I could talk about it. Check out more Ango. It's very frustrating, guys, but it is what it is. You know what else is very frustrating? Vince McMahon is still employed by the WWE, and TKO is not afraid to talk about this publicly. Guys, in new filings made to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission in conjunction with their first quarterly earnings report on November 7th, TKO further documented the risk Vince McMahon brings to their business. The Special Committee of Independent Members of WWE's Board of Directors investigation into allegations of misconduct by Mr. McMahon, and any further allegations and investigations may have an adverse financial and operational impact on our business performance. It goes on to say so much more. There's a lot of subsections in regards to Vince McMahon. But there's one thing I read that was interesting. Mr. McMahon's membership on our board could expose us to negative publicity and or have other adverse financial and operational impacts on our business. His membership also may result in additional scrutiny or otherwise exacerbate the other risks described herein. Any of these outcomes could directly or indirectly have adverse financial and operational impacts on our business. So at the end of the day, TKO knows that Vince McMahon is a problem. We all know that Vince McMahon is a problem. We all have seen a better WWE without Vince McMahon. So the reality is, when will they get rid of Vince McMahon? I can certainly tell you this. Vince McMahon, he got his way back into the WWE. And I don't know if he could do anything else. However, Vince McMahon didn't give the business to his family. He chose money over family. Stephanie and Vince had a hard time apparently working with each other backstage. Where the hell is Shane McMahon? I don't know. If a man was willing to screw over his family instead of handing them over the business just so he could find his way back into the WWE, only to be removed from the creative process, I feel like this guy will, the only reason why he's sticking around in Endeavor right now, the only reason why they still got him there is because any chance that he gets, he would probably try to screw them over too. And that's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate. But what's even more unfortunate is that Vince is still there. And Vince, you know, it's funny when Dana White talks publicly about how Vince tried to screw him over. Now the UFC get a deal with Saudi Arabia, and he says that Vince McMahon made the call. Dana didn't have to do anything. Vince is the best business partner ever. Very, very frustrating. Guys, don't forget I'm giving away this championship belt at 100,000 subscribers. Go ahead and click subscribe today.